Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight on Resolute Square. We're 2 weeks away from the election. This time, in 2 weeks, I think, well, we'll talk about what we're going to have. But it is an extreme pleasure for me to be joined by my old uh, fallout shelter buddy, Matthew Dowd. Um, one of the smartest guys in politics. If you're not following Matthew, you definitely should. Um, we spent a year and a half together in a fallout
Yep.
shelter in Austin in the Bush campaign in 99, 2000. Um, and we have Rick, who's coming in from some undisclosed location. I hope you caught him this morning on Morning Joe with the new Lincoln Project ad, which was totally kick-ass,
Yep.
pushing back on the fact that Trump is attacking the vice president for his own policy. And Joe Trippi from the Eastern Shore live. You should be following that Trippi show. So look, Matthew, since it's rare that we are graced with your presence, let's kick it off with you. How do you see the race?
Well, thanks. It's great to be with you, Stuart. And yeah, I remember fondly the days of 2000, which actually, the more times I hear folks say this is the closest election in history, I can't help but think of 2000,
Yeah.
2004,
Right.
and 2000 and 2012 and 2012. I mean, all of which, in my view, were actually as close or closer than this race. But things happened as they normally do in those races. But it's great to be with you. And I mean, I think that this election is incredibly stable once has been incredibly stable once the vice president got in the race and got the nomination. It hasn't, in my view, no matter what the press seems to constantly say or want to say, it's basically been stable for 6 or 7 weeks in this. If you throw out all of the trash GOP polls that have been inserted in this and some of the crazy, analysis that's done, including the betting market and all of that stuff, it's basically been a 3-point race for 7 weeks nationally. And with Harris having an advantage in a majority of the 7 key states. And that's the way it's been for 7 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Matt's got a great point there. It has
so
much.
I think the race is more like 2012 than 2016 and 2020 because I think the enthusiasm advantage that Harris has in this is more like the Obama advantage. And you were very familiar, obviously, with that race, which was a 1-point race until Election Day. Then it became a 4-point race because of turnout in that. And then every swing state sort of fell the way you thought it would fell in a block. And I think that is what is highly likely to happen in this race, that her margin is at the low end of what it's going to be nationally. And I think six of 7 of the states are all going to flow in one direction. That's what I think.
I'm going to go put that bet on Polymarket right now.
And for the life of me, well, if I could bet on Polymarket, if I could bet, we can't bet as U.S. citizens on Polymarket. But if I could bet, if I could bet, and I didn't want to invest in that situation, I'd put my mortgage on it. Actually.
Well, listen, we can talk offline about my crypto account that I have. We can talk offline about my crypto account I have set up offshore that will let us do this. Rick, what are you thinking, man?
Trying to get. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yep.
All right, good. Look, I think, as Matt pointed out, there are an awful lot of noisy, garbage Republican polls that are being dumped out there, in part to futz with these.
Are you guys hearing them? I'm not hearing them.
I'm hearing him. Yeah.
All right. To screw with these political market sites and to rely on the 2 things Trump really needs to do right now. He needs to hold his base, which he's desperate to keep his base in line. And the second part of what he has to do is try to demoralize the Democrats. And that's why you're seeing all these polls from these brand new pollsters and these brand new, or these people that come out like cicadas every 4 years and suddenly produce, a Republican plus 12 poll in Minnesota or whatever. I think that a lot of that stuff has been very overpriced in the political media right now. I think they've been over indexing for that stuff. So I do think it is a stable race. I think that it's a marginal Harris race right now. My biggest worry is not that she's going to win. I think she's going to win. My biggest worry is she doesn't win big enough on election night to deter an awful lot of very bad outcomes for the next 76 days after that.
Yeah, and that's what I think all this is about. Look, I as you guys know, ad nauseum, I've been a proponent that this is a 46-53, 47-53 kind of race. That's naturally where it can go. I don't think it can go much bigger than that, but that's where I think it could go. I'm sort of agreeing with Matthew here about how with the differential in terms of turnout, get out the vote, early voters where we have got a better organization in terms of zeroing in on the people who are less likely to vote, but putting all the energy into them on election day. I think this could easily lift up to be that kind of margin for her. And I've been saying that for some time, but I don't think the polling, all this betting market polling stuff, yeah, it does, is to demoralize Democrats and to energize the MAGA base. But I really think, as kind of I think what Rick was alluding to, it's about setting up the next big lie. They are, basically we're ahead in the markets, we're ahead in the polls. They're going to flood the zone again like they did in 2022 with a bunch of red wavy polls that turn out to be red mirage bullshit. But they're going to do that, and they are doing it now. And I think, it has that impact of, demoralizing and energizing them. But I think fundamentally it's about so he can go out at 9 or 10 o'clock at night on November 5th and declare victory. And then say to everybody, and by the way, tonight when you go to sleep, they're going to steal it from you.
Yep.
And we know, and set that whole freaking big lie up.
And we know our brother, South African brother, Elon Musk is going to play a role in that. In fact, we have a little clip. If you could play, I think this is a historic moment in presidential campaigns we're about to see that really should be enshrined with the best moments here. This is from a waltz rally.
And that's not a joke. But look, I'm not going to waste all the time I'm in. I'm going to talk about his running mate. His running mate, Elon Musk. Seriously. Where is Senator Vance after he got asked the simplest question in the world at the debate? Did Donald Trump lose the 2020 election? And after 2 weeks, he finally said, no, he didn't. That's where he's been spending his time. But that's it. So, look, Elon's on that stage, jumping around, skipping like a dipshit on these things. You know it.
Yeah.
There you go. And you know that little dipshit is going to go out and say it was stolen. And,
he's going to say our Twitter metrics tell us it was stolen or something like that. But by the way, guys, I don't know of many better words than dipshit in the epithet catalog. I have a large epithet catalog. It just captures some particularly perfect thing of Elon, like just so right on the money.
I have spent most of my time signing his petition under false names in hopes I could win $1 million. But there might be some upside potential to this still. But Matthew, let me ask you a question. Do you think that organization is going to play a large role in this? Because, Harris' campaign really seems to have a well-built organization. They've certainly thrown a lot at it. And as best we can tell, Trump has just decimated anything that was internal and outsourced it now. What's your feeling about that? Wait, you're on mute. You're on mute, Matthew. Wait.
Yeah.
There?
Yeah.
Yep, we got you.
Oh, I don't know. It's weird. I'm a big believer. I'm a big believer in, first of all, the amount of times I heard dipshit growing up and throughout my life is I couldn't count the number of times I heard it. And it was used a lot when you're driving in a car. It's used a lot when you're driving in a car, in traffic. It's quite often used, or when there's construction workers on the highway. That is, dipshit is used quite often. I think organization matters at a point or a point and a half.
Right.
And so I think it can change the dynamics. It can take a race from a half a point in Michigan to a point and a half or so, or 2 points in Michigan.
Yeah.
And or Nevada or Arizona or wherever, North Carolina. And so I think that's where organization matters. And I think the money they've raised, though they've flooded the airways and done all of that, and they've had abundance of money to use. I think the ability to recruit volunteers that can be utilized in the next 2 weeks is underestimated from that capacity to do that in an organizational way. And they have the people that know what they're doing. From everything I am aware of and have talked to them about, they know what they're doing. And they know where to go, and they know the voters they need to talk to, and they know all of that. And so I think that's why I think the polls, like they did in 2012, can underestimate by a point or a point and a half just in that organizational dynamic that exists. Mm-hmm. So, I think that's important. And one thing I didn't get to comment on the last conversation, this is why I think the results from what all you said about what they're setting up on election night, I think North Carolina, more than any other state, the results in North Carolina can fix that dynamic more than any other state because it's a state called early. It's a state called early. And if she wins that state, no matter the shenanigans they try to say happen in Pennsylvania and Michigan, if that happens, the psychological effect of an early call in North Carolina, I think is tremendous. It's tremendous.
Absolutely.
I'll just have to note for historical purposes that I was in the room when Matthew was calling people in networks to get them to overturn Florida in 2000 when they called it for Florida. And he made, which I thought was a very sound point, he said, Tim Rutherford, I can't tell you that my guy's going to win, but you can't tell me the other guy's going to win. So how can you call it?
Yep.
Which, proved to be true. I guess, to some degree, Arizona played that role when Fox called Arizona last time. It made it harder. But it was at the tail end, not the front end.
But, the point Matthew makes is...
And I think... I'm sorry, Joel, one other thing. I actually think Donald Trump and the campaign know that.
Right.
Because they spent all day yesterday in North Carolina. They spent most of today. And if they had confidence they were winning, they were going to win this race, they wouldn't have done 5 stops in North Carolina over the last 48 hours.
That's right.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. The one thing you can never lie about is where you go and where you spend money.
Yeah. But I was going to say the point Matthew makes is, again, Biden lost North Carolina by 74,000 votes. Nikki Haley got 250,000 votes against Trump in North Carolina. The Obama people know, the Harris people all know that. They have their targets. And that ground game, taking it now to a place like Georgia where we, won it by 14,000 votes, that ground game can make that. I agree with Matthew. Whether it doesn't have to be a half a point or a point and a half. It can make the difference between going negative 14,000 and going positive 28,000, which in some of these states is going to really matter. And I think in North Carolina, very possible for Harris to pull it out.
I also think that the outsourcing of the Trump ground game to Elon and to the DeSantis consultants has turned into, all of us have had experience dealing with petitioners and hired field people, and it's the nightmare from hell in a normal way. But when you've got Elon Musk who thinks, I'm going to throw an app on their phones and pay them money to run around, and it's just going to work magically because he threw money at it, all I can say is some people are going to buy beach houses off of Elon this year, but it doesn't seem like it's a crack field operation at this point.
What I love about this is, as we all know, the going rate for signature companies, they go out to get petitions is what, like $4 a signature paid to the company. He's paying $1 million, so and Trump wants him in charge of government efficiency. So this is really a great plan there, dude.
So I have a question for all of you guys. We are starting to see some, like today, what news kept coming out of New York on all these House races in New York that are closing up. Mm-hmm. Suddenly, John Avlon in New York 1 is in the strike zone against Nick LaLotta in an R+5 district. He's now back 2 points. You've got Mondaire Jones closing up. You've got suddenly, all these races in New York. And I know New York is an outlier, but we're also seeing it. Whitney Fox down in Florida 13 suddenly tied in an R+4 district, or ahead in an R+4 district. I always fumble his name. Will Rollins out in California suddenly moving up swiftly. All these House races seem like they're suddenly popping for the Democrats. I'm not seeing the same moves for Republicans. What do you guys ascribe that to? Because I don't know if it's the Harris ground game lifting everybody. That wouldn't make sense because of these New York and California races or Florida. But I think maybe we're seeing an indicator there, but I'm not sure I'm smart enough to figure it out yet.
Matthew, what do you think?
I think it goes exactly to what I thought was going to happen in this race, which is it's an early indicator of the Democratic enthusiasm advantage playing out. This often happens. It plays out in local races. You see it in a local race before you see it in a national race. Mm-hmm. And that's what I think we're seeing. And what's interesting about this, same thing is happening in California. So, and the dynamics of Harris, this is what's so funny about everybody. Oh, the race is closed. It's gotten closer. Trump's got momentum. What's funny about that is in no state other than the 7 target states has he achieved any momentum. So he's not closing the gap in California. He's not closing the gap in New York. He's not closing the gap. He's not widening the gap in Texas. He's not widening the gap in Ohio. And so how does he close the gap nationally, but move no states, but move no big states? It doesn't happen. That's why it's a false
that's like
image. But I think what all of this congressional races are showing that Rick's talking about is an early indication of the difference between the vice president this time in 2016, where Hillary was at a disadvantage on enthusiasm, and we all should have recognized that it began to show up in local races. Mm-hmm. And we didn't see that because so many of us were convinced there's no way Trump could win. But that enthusiasm advantage that Trump had showed up early, about 10 days out, and the same thing is happening this time.
I also think, look, what I'm seeing is, and I've been saying this for a while too, is I don't think there are any Democrats or pro-democracy people who are splitting their tickets. In other words, there aren't going to be any people, very many people in Maryland who vote for Kamala Harris and Larry Hogan. That's just not going to happen. It may not be fair to Larry Hogan. It's just the way it's going to go. Maybe it is fair to him. But I think what's clearly happening is how could Sherrod Brown be up by 4 or 5 points or up in Ohio and Trump be up in Ohio? How could Gallegos be up in Nevada, in Arizona, and Trump be, even be even or up by a couple when Gallegos is beating Carrie Lake by 8, 9, 10 points? It's simple. All the ticket splitters are on the Republican side, whether it's because it's a Haley voter who's going to vote for Trump, but doesn't want to give him a rubber stamp in the House and the Senate, whether it's somebody who's going to vote against Trump with Harris, but needs to sort of satisfy their Republican bona fides by voting at the House and the Senate level. I think there's a lot of ticket splitting, which I think is why I think Tester can win Montana because of this, for an example. I think that's what's happening in some of these House races. Yeah, I think it's happening. All the ticket splitters are on the Republican side, the Trump side of this thing, either bailing on Trump down ballot or like I said, bailing on him top ballot and then moving down ballot. But I'm not talking a lot, 3, 4 points, 2 points, whatever. But I think it's enough to sort of be part of that surprise that Matthew Dowd's talking about, could be talking about.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Is there, we always used to say, incumbents get what they get in the tracking. What do you guys think of the theory that Trump is performing like the incumbent in this race? And that if you're for Trump, you were for Trump. And if you weren't for Trump, you're looking for some other candidate to vote for.
Well, Stuart, as you keep saying, he's not getting new customers. Mm-hmm. So his number is his number. I don't think there's a shy Trump vote out there. I don't think there's a hidden Trump vote out there in the pool anymore. Yeah. So I think his number is his number, hard stop.
Matthew, look, we would be sued for malpractice. I was going to say, if we didn't ask you about Texas, but keep going. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say that's why her enthusiasm and turnout models and all of the things she has to do is that he's going to get his votes, but she has to get her votes to maintain his number at his number, because his number of a smaller pool at 47 can win it if the pool is smaller.
Right.
So that's. I mean, I wish the Democrats would put their chest out. Like, I don't ever understand this about Democrats. So why don't they say,
hallelujah,
we're ahead in this race. We're going to win this race.
Yes.
If we do the work, if we do the work we need to do, we finish strong. We're going to win. We got this. I don't understand why they.
I don't.
Why they go off in this? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
welcome to the Democratic Party.
Guys.
Yeah, you walk out on the field and you go, "Well,
I've lived with this for 30 years, 40 years. It's just it makes me scratch my head too. I still have never gotten that. We just exude this worrying, hand-wringing thing that's just crazy. Every poll.
They're playing my song.
And even when we know,
Rick, thanks for joining.
Thanks, guys. Have a great night. Matthew, thanks for coming on.
Hey, Rick.
I'm going home, finally, after 90 days.
All right, brother.
But even when we know, thanks, Rick. But even when we know that it's the red, it's the red wavy polls flooding the zone again, the party, it tends to wring its hands and worry instead of putting its chest out and saying, "Screw that, we're going to kick your ass," which I think is really important. But I've been preaching that for a while. So has Simon Rosenberg and bunch of other people in my party, but you still have to fight it.
So, Matthew, got to ask you about Texas.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
The election, not the last Saturday.
Well, I'll tell you here. So I think it's going to be close. I think he's likely to win, but I think it's going to be close at the top. Yeah. I actually think Colin Allred has a real shot at winning in this Senate race. And some indication is I went to vote early today. And Is
this in Wimberley?
I was in Wimberley. I went to Wimberley to go vote early in Wimberley. And then because the line was too long and I had to be somewhere, I waited in line out the door, out this little community center, out the door. It must have been 100 people in line in little Wimberley. And so I waited a little, didn't do it. So then I drove to San Marcos, which is a bigger town, and went there. And the line was 3 times as long in San Marcos.
Wow.
In San Marcos. Now Hayes County is a purple county that voted for Biden. This is where I live and voted for Biden, but had been a Republican county until the last couple of elections, and Beto carried it and all of that. And so to me, there's this, and it wasn't like you could see a whole bunch of Trump people with flags and all that. It was just like normal people wanting to come and vote. That's what it felt like to me in the course of this. So I think, and we're seeing these turnout numbers in early vote in a lot of other states too, that there's this huge, people wanting to go vote in this election that hasn't been really captured in the mantra in the media. This surge, I think, that is about to happen. I mean, I think we're going to break 170 million people vote, which is crazy. Yeah. In the course of this. And so I think it's going to be close at the top between Harris and Trump. And I think Allred has a real shot.
Well, I thought that his debate performance was as ass-kicking a debate performance.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah.
It was so good to see. It was
you
so
could have.
good.
Yeah. So, Matthew and I just have to tell us a little story. Matthew and I both were involved in debate prep for Bush in 2000. And when we heard there was this college debate champ who was working for the campaign, and I went around asking people like, Ted Cruz, I said, well, how come he's not involved in the debate prep? And universally, the answer was, have you met him yet? And I think it's safe to say that there was the guy at the top of the ticket who had no interest in being around Ted Cruz.
Well, I wish Bush would come out and say he's going to vote for Harris. I wish he would in this. I'm kind of disappointed he hasn't. I think it's just the kind of thing that he should do and stand up. But we all know that he's voting for Colin Aldred. I mean, I know he's voting for Colin Aldred.
Yeah. Yeah, he hates Cruz. Yeah. I got to just say here a little, Matthew was the chief strategist for the 2004 campaign, the last time Republicans won the popular vote. It's only happened once since 1988. And he really, before Trump, he really was, I always thought, one of the strongest voices of conscience when you spoke out about the war.
Always.
And you said what a lot of people were thinking, but were afraid to say in the party. And it was really all respect due for that, Matthew. That's not an easy thing that you did there. And it's hard to argue history's not proving you right.
Well, I appreciate that. And I just think in one of those things, it's always one of those things that, and I remember it, this is a sort of where I came to a place, people talk about loyalty, and I believe in loyalty. I believe in loyalty.
I know you do. Yeah.
But I also believe, yes, I also believe that in loyalty, there's a hierarchy of things you're supposed to be loyal to, right? In down on the list is loyalty to your organization or party. And then maybe up from that is loyalty to a person. But at some point, loyalty to the truth and loyalty to fundamental principles rises above those things. And that's the argument I got in with some of the folks that we know in the Bush world. When I did that, they were like, why don't you just, fade off and not say anything? And why are you being disloyal? And this obviously arose for me in a personal thing, but I think it's evidenced is why people can't distinguish between loyalty to the truth and loyalty to fundamental principles and loyalty to a person and loyalty to a party. They can't seem to distinguish that those two things are separate.
Yeah.
Well, and I know it takes people, and I know, Stuart, you've been through this. I mean, you've been through this, and it, obviously for years and years in this. It is a process, because if you've vested your life, invested years, invested work in something, and then you finally have to come to a realization that it was all in many ways bullshit. I mean, much of it was bullshit,
or maybe a lie.
That's a psychological struggle.
Yeah. No, and we did battle, all of us. I was on the other side of both you guys, and you terrified me the entire time. But I always saw that. I think all three of us did in each other.
Yep.
Which is why I think we're all here today, because we saw that there was something more important than our loyalty to the party or to whoever to a candidate or that candidate, but to the country and to each other as Americans. And I always saw that in the two of you. And Matthew, it's always drawn me to the things you write, the things you say are just so important. Your voice has been really important this cycle, and I really want to just tell you how much I appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah, Matthew was the first out there with country over party.
Yeah, I've been laughing about that as I've watched the banners go up, actually.
Yeah, you should have done, was it Michael Jordan that copyrighted three-peat or something, that you could get a piece of a four-peat that you could get. So just take a second and tell us about the origins of that.
The origins of country over party?
Yeah, for you, when you were coming out.
Sure. So it was right after Election Day in 2016.
Yeah.
And I've been through this cycle of I worked on Democratic campaigns around the country, but it's a lot in Texas. Ran the last Democrat to win statewide here, which was the Lieutenant Governor Bullock in '94 when Bush ran and won the first time for governor. And then I went to work for Bush because I believed in his ideas of, interesting looking back at it as like solving the division, getting past the polarization, putting the country first and all that. And then after my break with Bush, I was sort of like done with the parties in that way. And though I still see myself as a conservative in many ways, like I'm a conservative in like fiscally and I believe, I don't mean this to be, my, forum, but on abortion, I believe in the woman's right to choose, but I'm also not pro-abortion. I believe that decision ought to be made by the woman, but I also think we ought to do everything possible we can to ensure that decision, that the woman doesn't feel like she has to make that decision, whether it's finances and health considerations, all that. And so I have some conservative values of that. And I just got to the point after the Trump stuff, I was like, what can I do to like send a signal to people like me that were former Republicans or Republicans of like, this is not what we want to sign up for. And it sort of alludes to the Lieutenant Governor of Georgia, who, when he said, I'm not asking you to be a Democrat, I'm asking you to be a patriot. And that was my initial attempt. And then I created this banner thing and paid some guys to create this logo of Country Over Party and did all that, and obviously made T-shirts. And I've given all of the money to charities, local charities and charities. Any money I made off the T-shirts and all that. And it was just a branding thing to sort of get people to start thinking in terms of stop saying vote Democrat, because I don't think it's ever helpful to say vote Democratic. I just think, Pete, there's a segment of our society that just is not a persuasive argument of, vote blue, and vote blue. And it never, I just think that this is it. I sometimes cringe at that just, you're just supposed to do this, as opposed to saying, put the country ahead of the party and vote for the, be patriotic and vote for the person. And that's how it started. And it
do you guys think that the Liz Cheney Harris little barnstorming tour, do you think it's having an impact?
Yes, because I think that it goes to a lot of, not with Republicans, people that are saying I'm a Republican today. I don't think it's moving those people. I think in the end, that's going to line up 94-6, the people that call themselves Republicans. But I do think former Republicans and independents who don't like either party, who want to have something that's like, that's more bipartisan or more nonpartisan. And I think it sends a message to people like that. And I can just tell you, there's people in my family in Michigan that kind of message who aren't fans of, don't want, they're not like raring to go and vote for the vice president, but that kind of message actually makes them more comfortable in their choice of voting against Donald Trump.
Right.
And that's where I think it has an effect.
I wish some other people we had worked for would be doing the same.
Me too.
It's a disappointment.
I'm still amazed. I got to say, and we were going to talk about this crazy stuff that Donald Trump, that General Kelly. I don't kind of get the generals that are saying this stuff and saying this is what Trump does, and not willing to publicly stand up and say it.
I don't. How do you figure that? I mean, I find that.
But it's the same thing with a lot of the politicians. I mean, or former presidents or whatever. I mean, I'm not. I just think, like, why? What? They know what's at stake here. I can't fathom any of it at this point, given what's at stake.
Yeah. Well, look, guys, we could go on all night about this, but before we go, Joe, tell us about your compatriots' efforts to have a positive alternative to the hellscape that Twitter has become.
Oh, thanks. So we've created SEZ, it's SEZ.us, It's a pro-democracy social network alternative to X and to the algorithm there that is tearing community apart. Hope you guys, everybody who's listening, will check it out at sez.us. Matthew was nice enough to be one of the first to sign up, as has Resolute Square and the Lincoln Project and a whole bunch of other people across the political spectrum who are not interested. It's not a partisan thing. There's nothing partisan about being pro-democracy. We can all build a community there that amplifies important insights and does not amplify name calling and trashing and amplify the anger and divisive stuff that happens on X. So I hope you'll check it out, sez.us. And thanks, Matthew, for signing up.
I was going to ask you, you're welcome. I'm really glad you're doing it, as I've told you, and I want to be more helpful to that as we go forward. I was going to ask both of you this on this topic. Is I am contemplating. I mean, when this, I still communicate on X, even though I think it's an awful platform and it's getting worse and worse and worse. But part of me is like, it's awful. I'm going to try to, at least add some positive value to it and some facts to it as best I can. So, obviously I've built up a following and all of this stuff, but I actually don't want to be part of it anymore.
I feel dirty every time I go there.
Yeah.
I feel like I need to take a shower.
What we at Says Us are saying is stay and tell people, hey, there's this thing called Says. First of all, fight the lies, fight the disinfo. A lot of the press are still there, et cetera, but also, make a case every once in a while, once a day or twice a day, that there's something better that we can build over here. Check out Says Us. And I think so we're not urging anybody to leave. We think we need to fight there through the election, at least, if not through the 76 days from election day to the inaugural, because I think those may be in a lot of ways just as important to fight disinfo as between now and the election. But you can do both things. And in fact, on says.us, when you post on Says, you automatically, if you want to, cross-post on X, which is a feature I think most people on Says Us haven't discovered yet. But I've tried it a couple times the last 3 or 4 days, and it really works. So,
good. Well, I'll do that.
Yeah, I'll do that. And Matthew, tell everybody how to find you on that hellscape if they're not following you yet.
It's at Matthew J. Dowd on X, but it's also at Matthew J. Dowd on Says Us, says.us. So you can go to either one.
And your writings these days, you're writing.
Well, I'm the writing that I'm doing is actually I'm trying to explore some possible fiction stuff that I'm working on.
Very cool.
Which I've never done before, which is like trying to stretch some muscles of fiction writing, because I think it actually helps me disconnect from the harshness of our stuff. It's like going and hiking a mountain or something, or by a lake. It's the same kind of thing. So I'm doing that. So maybe I'll have something out next year. That's
fantastic.
My attempt at some fiction.
Right, you're a beautiful writer. Your essays, they're always. Most people, when you read them, you know what they're going to say. With you, I read it to find out what you're going to say.
That's very kind.
And
Thank you.
That to me is Marcus May really has something to say. So thanks everybody. Everybody watching, make sure you sign up to Resolute Square. That's how we're going to grow this. Sign up to Says Us. Follow Matthew. Follow the Trippi Show, the podcast. It's tremendous. Rick Wilson's The Enemies List. We have a new show that is fantastic, Decoding Fox News, and the Lincoln Project podcast. And Matthew and I may end up being the only people left that don't have a podcast. And Punching Up.
We're working on
night, Maya May. Huge talent. You got to watch her. I'm such a fanboy. And vote as soon as you can. And get out there and talk about how we're going to win.
Yeah, and thank you for having me. Great to be here. You guys are the best. I'm a huge friends of yours, but huge fans of both of you. And I just want to tell people, put your chest out, run through the tape. We got this. We're going to win this. And, work until the clock strikes 0. And if we do the work, we'll win this thing.
Yep.
All right.
Thanks, Matthew.
Thank
We'll
y'all.
see you guys
Thanks,
soon.
guys.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
guys. Take care.